movement of a task force to an overseas area of operations will probably involve a strategic movement by aircraft and ship. The vehicles and equipment of the task force would be administratively loaded to maximize the utilization of all aircraft and ship resources. Once the decision has been made to deploy a task force, a National Movement Control Center would be activated at NDHQ to coordinate the road, rail, air, and sea movement activities within Canada and overseas. The National Movement Instruction would be prepared to outline the movement of all elements of the task force from the assembly area and port of embarkation in Canada to the overseas port of disembarkation and its associated assembly area. The establishment, manning, and operation of all movement resources, including movement control centers and their associated detachments, would also be part of this instruction. The Task Force Movement Officer prepares the Task Force Movement Table and executes the National Movement Instruction. The Task Force Movement Table consolidates the unit movement staff tables and is used to prepare plans, orders, and instructions pertaining to the ship's stowage and to aircraft and rail car loadings. As part of the overall movement plan, the personnel and equipment of the Task Force Advance Party and the personnel of the main body would be airlifted overseas. As the force receives its orders, procedures are being activated to move its tasked elements to the designated assembly area. Once the National Movement Instruction has been received, the Movement Control Officer can establish the detailed role his organization will play in the movement overseas. He prepares the required directives for his movement control detachments. The Movement Control Center is responsible for the overall movement activity at each railhead, airhead, and seaport, and for the operation of its movement control detachments. Each detachment is then responsible for the movement of all personnel and equipment through its specific areas. A Sea Transport Liaison Officer has been appointed to the Movement Control Center, controlling the seaport of embarkation. There he provides the liaison link between the movement control elements and the troops being sea-lifted. In addition, he is actively involved in planning the move to the seaport and in completing arrangements for the required port work parties. Back at the formation, the Senior Embarkation Officer coordinates the preparations for the deployment of his units. He is also organizing the required links with various liaison officers, the unit embarkation officers, and the Movement Control Center. At the same time, unit embarkation officers are busy updating the unit movement staff table, preparing instructions concerning dangerous cargo, coordinating unit preparation activities, liaison with the Sea Transport Liaison Officer and Port Movement Control Detachment Commander on all aspects of the embarkation, liaison with Movement Control Center concerning the arrival of unit vehicles and equipment at the assembly area, arranging for the security of vehicles, equipment, and stores during the road move, and liaison with the Port Movement Control Detachment on the positioning of unit vehicles and equipment at the embarkation port. Throughout the units, final preparations are undertaken, ensuring that vehicles and trailers are cleaned, inspected, and serviced, with necessary maintenance completed as required. And after loading, all are properly weighed and marked. The loads of all containers, vans, and cargo carriers are checked for security. Preservation procedures have been completed for vehicles and equipment assigned as deck cargo, and all documentation has been completed. The National Movement Instruction has also been received at the Formation HQ, enabling the G3 and G4 staff to complete the planning for their portion of the move. Once the details are finalized, the HQ staff brief the senior embarkation officer. Unit embarkation officers and other formation representatives outlining a schedule of events, routes to the assembly area and the seaport of embarkation, pier assignment details, special instructions for handling containers, dangerous cargo, vans, helicopters, etc., and updating of unit contacts. The handling, storage, and transportation of dangerous cargo are of particular importance and require adherence to specific regulations. All items of hazardous cargo must therefore be checked to ensure that dangerous cargo requests are processed without delay. All safety regulations are followed, including packaging, placarding, and labeling. All loads are compatible. Cargo is properly segregated, and blocking and bracing are as per regulations. With all preparations completed, unit elements depart in accordance with their movement orders for the task force assembly area. At the assembly area, final preparations are made, and unit vehicles are inspected, documented, and formed into packets in accordance with the ship's loading plan. Once ready, the packets move to the call forward area, where they await the instructions of the Movement Control Center for dispatch to the seaport of embarkation. Upon their arrival at the port, the vehicles are directed to marshalling and waiting lanes. Here, they are segregated to meet the requirements of the ship's stowage plan, and the vehicle's loads are rechecked for security. The vehicle documentations are given to the Port Movement Control Detachment representative at this time. Because of the time required to complete the necessary teardown and preservation activities, the aviation resources must be brought in early. A port work party of approximately 30 drivers, maintenance, and medical personnel is provided by the formation on a shift basis. They work under the direction of the Port Movement Control Detachment. Their duties involve moving vehicles and equipment from the marshalling area to the loading area, and then onto the ship. Each shift is briefed on all safety aspects pertaining to their employment. Once the loading cycle commences, vehicles and equipment are dispatched forward by the Port Movement Control Detachment staff to the loading area, where they are taken under control of the ship's loaders. Each vehicle, helicopter, container, and piece of equipment is tallied as it is loaded on board the ship. This tally confirms the ship's loading plan and forms the basis of the ship manifest. Some problems may complicate the loading process. For example, due to the tide, the angle for the loading may become so steep that long vehicles, tractor-trailers, bridge layers, or helicopters may not be able to clear the ramp. Fatigue, weather, and light conditions will affect the speed of loading. The lack of material handling equipment will slow down activities, and space constraints may congest the dockside traffic. Proper utilization of material handling equipment is essential for efficient loading. Handling equipment must be organized prior to the ship's arrival, and its use included in the briefing to the port work party. The loading of a roll-on, roll-off ship involves the driving of vehicles onto the stern or side ramps. The loading of tractor-trailers, vans, or containers is concurrent with other activities. The ship is loaded from the bottom up, and the internal movement between decks is by ramp or elevator. All vehicle breakdowns are immediately cleared away to prevent the blocking of traffic. Normally, POL vehicles, vans, and containers are stowed on the weather deck. These must be properly preserved to lessen the effect of salt spray and the elements. Vehicles containing classified equipment are stowed in such a manner as to be easily accessible for their mandatory daily security inspection. Ammunition is normally shipped separately using containers. Inside the ship, vehicles are directed to their assigned location, where they are secured by chains or steel wire to lashing points, situated approximately every 1.5 meters on each side of the vehicle lane. Once the ship is loaded, the ship's crew carry out a pre-departure check to ensure that vehicles are not in contact with the ship's hull or other vehicles. They are properly tied down and the parking brakes are on, and damages have been recorded. A ship's party consisting of about 10 personnel from the task force is provided to the ship to ensure vehicle and equipment security and to provide assistance in offloading should the ship terminate its journey at an alternate port. Once the cargo documentation is completed, the ship's captain is given the authorization to proceed. The Overseas Movement Control Organization includes a movement control center, various movement control detachments, a seaport of discharge, and an assembly area. Many activities are coordinated by the Overseas Movement Control Center in preparation for ship and aircraft arrivals. These include verification of the maritime data of the port, a review of the seaport facilities pertaining to material handling equipment, shore cranes and forklifts, stevedores and handling capacity, tides and ramp angle, messing and accommodation, a review of the airport facilities, a study of the ship's stowage plans to determine the vehicle discharge priority, planning for the marrying up of air and sea transported elements and their movement to the area of operation, confirming the locations for the unloading, marshalling, assembly, and transit camp areas, providing for the resources required at the airhead and at the port to ensure they can operate effectively. At the seaport of disembarkation, the Movement Control Detachment Commander and the ship's agent ensure that all is in readiness for the discharge activities. And as soon as the ship has berthed, they should liaise with the ship's captain to review problems involving the voyage and the discharge operation, which in its essence is the reverse of the loading. The overall security at the port is the responsibility of the Movement Control Officer. This includes arranging for the issue of civilian clearances within the port and controlling general access to the ships. All drivers and traffic control personnel must be briefed on the discharge procedures prior to the start of the operation. After the tie-downs have been removed, they are stowed away, clear of the traffic lane. Once the customs requirements have been satisfied, the vehicles are unloaded and moved to the marshalling area. A stringent traffic control structure is required, both inside the ship and on the wharf. Vehicles should be started just prior to their move to avoid a buildup of carbon monoxide. An MRT and a recovery vehicle should be stationed on the wharf to handle breakdowns. A tally check is done as each vehicle or piece of equipment is discharged from the ship. General cargo containers and vans are normally sent directly to unit echelon locations in the force administrative area, with ammunition containers being sent directly to ammunition points. Tracked vehicles and heavy equipment are loaded as soon as possible onto transporters for movement to the assembly area. When the discharge of a ship is completed, and any damages that occurred during the voyage are detailed, the ocean bill of lading is signed off. At the port marshalling area, vehicles are segregated by unit and verified for overall condition. Any required minor maintenance is performed. Unit drivers now marry up with their vehicles and are dispatched to the assembly area. A transit camp has been established near the port and the airport to provide messing, accommodation, and medical services for arriving personnel and for those awaiting the unloading of their equipment from ships and aircraft. It also acts as a control center for all personnel in transit to and from the operational area. One or more assembly areas may be established in accordance with the needs of the task force. Here, the vehicles and equipment are organized for a tactical move to the operational area. Vehicles are fueled up, loaded with combat supplies, and minor repairs are completed. Once the drivers are fed and briefed, the vehicles are formed into packets and dispatched to their location in the task force area of operation. Finally, keep in mind that the aim of a sea movement is that vehicles and equipment of a task force must arrive at destination in time. The keys to the success for a strategic sea movement operation are planning, preparation, organization, communications, effective liaison, and thorough briefing to all participants.